Hey everyone, a bit of good news for commercial real estate investors. Since the first of the month, the 10-year Treasury rate has fallen by about 15 basis points to the 4.2% range. But we have to consider the forces that pushed the rate lower. At the beginning of August, the newly released employment report included some massive downward revisions to the job numbers. Prior to the August release, the number of job additions in May was 144,000. That number was revised down to just 19,000. The job creation for June was also revised lower, from 147,000 jobs to 14,000 jobs. Combined, 258,000 jobs were erased from the tally. And that's a big change. Instead of being up by 855,000 jobs so far this year, we've only added 597,000 new jobs. And while the unemployment rate is still very low at 4.2%, we have to bear in mind that the labor force participation rate has fallen significantly since April. Over the last 3 months, labor force participation fell by 40 basis points, representing about 800,000 people who have left the workforce. And while that loss of workers helped keep the unemployment rate down, it could also be signaling a weakening labor market. And all that information from the jobs report spurred a shift of capital into the safety of the bond market, and that pushed interest rates lower. In addition, the weak employment report bolstered Wall Street's expectation that the Federal Reserve will cut rates in September. Wall Street is now assigning a 95% likelihood that the Fed will cut rates by 25 basis points at their September 17th meeting. And Wall Street believes the Fed won't stop there. Currently, the market is baking in a greater than 50% likelihood that the overnight rate will be lowered by 75 basis points to 3.5% by the end of the year. Now, we can't forget that the Federal Reserve overnight rate and the 10-year Treasury, upon which most commercial real estate loans are based, don't always move together. Remember last year, on September 18th, the Fed cut the overnight rate by 50 basis points, and over the next 30 days, the 10-year Treasury climbed by 40 basis points. So investors shouldn't assume that the weak jobs report and the expectations of a Fed rate cut will lower the interest rates on mortgage debt. Now, I also want to point out that even though Wall Street is betting the Fed will cut rates, that's also not a foregone conclusion. We can't forget that the potential inflationary impact of tariffs is still out there. And if significant signs of rising inflation show up in the 2 inflation reports that come out before the next Fed meeting, it's entirely possible the Federal Reserve won't cut rates. Remember, the Federal Reserve has a dual mandate. They need to keep inflation down, and they need to support job creation. Potentially, those 2 missions may be in conflict by September. And if the Fed sticks to its historical playbook, they'll keep rates higher to fight off inflation rather than drop rates to support job creation. So, what's all this mean for commercial real estate? First, investors should not assume rates will go down later this year. In fact, the interest rate climate right now may be a prime opportunity to lock in refis and debt on purchases. Second, the slackening pace of job creation, together with a variety of other indicators that are beginning to weaken, suggests the economy is slowing. Perhaps this could lead to a recession, perhaps not. Even though job creation has slowed, it is not negative. We're not losing jobs. But a slowing economic climate could weigh on household formation, reducing the pace of apartment absorption from its current record high level. We could also see slowing consumption that could weigh on retail and industrial space demand. And finally, office demand could potentially be bolstered by the tightening labor market as companies enforce more aggressive return to office mandates. So the remainder of 2025 could be a bit bumpy for both the economy and commercial real estate, but most property types remain structurally sound. And falling construction should offset a slowdown in space demand. When the economy gets choppy, some investors hit pause. But bumpy cycles often create opportunity, and investors need to look through the short-term headwinds and focus on the bigger supply and demand picture. That's where opportunity will show up, which is why investors always need to keep their eyes on the horizon.